Okay, folks, once again, and let's say welcome back to this panel discussion here this morning. We had to take that break to sort out a small technical issue here as we are here at the Peace Memorial Hall with my three panelists who will be giving insight into the way the public service operates as well as the way forward in what we like to call the new norm. At this moment, I'd like to invite the Director of the Public Sector Reform Unit, Mrs. Emma Jackson, to come to the stage to give us a few brief remarks.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to our virtual space as well. I want to welcome everyone to our public service talking points on the topic, a look into the new norm, a work-life balance for public servants. And as we all know what's going through St. Vincent and the Grenadines in our challenges, we want to look at the new norm or the new dispensation as we go forward in our daily life, work life. And we have capable panelists here, public servants, who would do justice to the topic. And I do not want to go into any details and take away their shine. But just to let you know that we're happy to have you here. Feel free to ask your questions when the question segment comes through. And on behalf of the Ministry of the Public Service, Consumer Affairs and Sports, I welcome you to one of our activities for Public Service Week. Thank you and have a good day.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Jackson. Of course, this Public Service Week of activities, and just to give you an idea of what we have in store for this week, yesterday we had the church service at the Methodist Church. It is, of course, the panel discussion here this morning. Tomorrow we'll have the minister's speech and also the public service talking point on VC3's roundtable program. Tomorrow is actually the day to be celebrated to be observed as Public Service Day. On Thursday, public servants' years of recognition, in-house ministries and departments. And so basically that is folks who have been involved or working with the public service for a number of years will be recognized within their own departments and ministries. And then on Friday, it will be a special recognition ceremony. We're also inviting you to take in that live watch party as well. It will be an entertaining, informative, and a very tremendous event. So as we switch right now to the introductory part for our panelists here this morning, we have two gentlemen and one lady. I'll start to my immediate left. And with us this morning, we have Mr. Edmund Jackson, who is employed in the role of Director General of Finance. And Edmund, I guess you can tell me in a nutshell, if I could phrase it, as the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Camilo Gonzalez, decides how the money is spent, but you are the one actually charged with spending the money.
Good morning, everyone, and let me welcome you to this panel discussion. Well, my role in the Ministry of Finance is all-encompassing in some respects. I have responsibility for the Ministry of Finance proper, the Treasury Department, the Customs and Excise Department, the Inland Revenue Department, Economic Planning, and ITSD. So it's a broad span of responsibility. Essentially, my role is to provide advice on the budget management. I mean, once the budget is decided, how we manage the funds, how we implement projects, which projects we implement, and also to provide advice on a range of fiscal and macroeconomic issues. So it's a do everything kind of role.
All right, then. You're basically the Swiss Army knife of the public service. All right. To my immediate left, we have with us Mr. Winston George. And Mr. George is the coordinator of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project. And I think that by virtue of just listening to that phrase, you could probably have an idea of exactly what that does. But Mr. George, probably in a nutshell, you could let us know exactly what that is, the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, and how it plans on working going forward.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Now, the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project is a World Bank funded project, which is being implemented in the 4 Windward Islands. In the context of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the government received funding from the World Bank to the tune of $30 million to implement this project. In a nutshell, what will it do? It will move a lot of our services from being 8 to 4 to 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week services. Basically, some of those services, you could get them anywhere, anytime, once you have access to the internet. Essentially, the project will look at a one-stop shop for customs transactions, one-stop shop for land and property transactions, e-tax. Also, it will look at a unique identifier and citizen authentication. And with that also, you will have a e-payments gateway. And principally, several of these applications will be integrated. So you have a single sign-on, right? And you have a single gateway whereby you make payments to the government. I probably want to stop at that point in terms of the project.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Mr. George. And of course, we probably get more into detail as to what exactly can happen regarding that once Mr. George gives his full presentation. Our third and final panelist this morning is Dr. Joselle Miller. Dr. Joselle Miller is a psychologist and also the CEO of the Vallejo Experience. Dr. Miller would be looking at the standpoint of how we operate within the new norm and how it can affect us mentally, if I'm phrasing that correctly.
Yes, you're very right. Good morning to everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, being the rose among the thorns. I'm very happy for that. As a psychologist, my aim really and truly is to change the normative as it relates to mental health, mental wellness, and to let persons understand that psychology is embedded in everything that we do. So it is for persons to fully grasp that when we think of mental wellness, we are not thinking of institutionalization. We are thinking mostly of normal functioning and how persons can, be at their optimum even as you work on a day-to-day basis.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. These are our 3 panelists here this morning. And we'll be hearing from each one of them individually as they get ready to give their particular presentations on their particular fields. But again, I'd like to invite those of you who are viewing right now on the social media, on our virtual space, take in what our panelists give you, and then we will open up the presentation a little bit later on for question and answers. Now, simply to do that, all you have to do is simply type your questions into the chat area of the feed, and then I would relay it to the particular panelist, and we'll have an informative and interactive session. And the same goes as well for those of us here in the audience. All right, we have a microphone there where if there are any questions that anyone has regarding anything regarding the public service and the way going forward, or anything that you've heard from any of our panelists, you can do the same. Also, I'd like at this moment to welcome our listening audience on NBC Radio, who is bringing this presentation live. So once again, the theme for Public Service Week in St. Vincent and the Grenadines: resilient public service, appreciating the spirit and strength of public servants. At this juncture, we'd like to now, turn the mic over now to Mr. Edmund Jackson, the Director General of Finance, and he'll give his particular presentation on the way forward.
Again, sorry about that. New to mics. So we're going to kick off, I'm going to kick off the discussion by putting into perspective the public service in terms of dollars and cents, because I think it is important for the general public, the listening audience, persons online, to get a sense as to what we mean when we talk about the public service in a tangible way. So I'm going to bore you a bit with a couple of statistics, but hopefully they will bring home the point that I'm trying to make. So some facts and figures on government spending. The 5-year average of total spending, and I'm talking about total spending of government, the 5-year average is 665 million per year. So on average, over the last 5 years, the government has spent $665 million annually. Now, this is interesting. This is an interesting statistic because it says that all of us here who are public servants, those of you who are listening, we have participated in that expenditure. We had a role to play in that expenditure. How effective that expenditure has been in delivering the services, the goods, and the projects that they were supposed to deliver depended on how well we functioned. Just to drill it down a bit, down into the wages and salaries of public servants, the 5-year annual average is $283 million. On average, every year the government spends $283 million on wages and salaries on personnel. That's approximately $24 million per month annually. And, so when you take that into account, the cost of providing the services that we do, and this does not take into account the other running costs, materials and supplies, other operating costs for providing services, you will see how important the public service is as an entity in delivering service in the economy. So what does that mean in orders of quantity as it relates to the total value of goods and services that is produced in the economy? Those of you who did economics, it's called the gross domestic product. And as citizens, this is the statistic that we should pay attention to because it measures how well the country performed in adding value to the economy each year, the gross domestic product. So the total spending of government as a percentage of the total value of goods and services produced annually is 31%. So this tells you that government activity is of a significant importance to the economy in terms of comparing the amount of money that the government spends, that we all spend as public servants, and that taxpayers finance in terms of the total value added in the economy. In wages and salaries, as a percentage of the economy, it's 13%. And this is an important number so that public servants I really would like you to hear and listen to this. Now, this is not to admonish or to reprimand you, but simply to be aware that every day that you come to work, it adds costs to doing business, and what we produce is important for us to produce it well and to produce it better. Now, broadly speaking, I don't know how far I need to go into this, but broadly speaking, what does the public sector provide? What does the public service provide? In a summary form, the public service provides basically three things. First, the public service provides public goods. And these are goods that the private sector, because of the nature of the product or service, has no interest in providing. So we provide for citizen security, the police service, the prison service, for justice and the like. We have the court system. We also provide school services generally. I mean, while this is a service that can be provided by the private sector here in St. Vincent, the public sector is a dominant provider. Similarly in health services and so on. So we provide public goods. That's the first thing. The second thing we do, and which has become increasingly important, especially in these times, with the various shocks that the economy has had to suffer, is that we provide social protection services and support to help those who are less fortunate and those who are vulnerable, because it is important to ensure that everyone has a basic standard of living. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, we facilitate business and economic activity. So if you were to think of yourself as where you are right now within the public service, you do either, well, I can't say either, there are three things. You do any one of these three things. Provide a public good or service, facilitate business and economic activity, or provide social protection services to the less fortunate. It is important, though, that in doing our work, that we pay attention to where we are and what we do, and understand that what we do on a daily basis in every hour of the day contributes overall to the economic well-being of the country. Because each of these three things that I mentioned, provision of public goods, social protection, business facilitation, all contributes to the business environment within which economic activity takes place. A healthy population is a more productive population. A more educated population is a more productive population, and so on and so forth. A safer and secure business environment, a country, makes business easier to do. So everything we do as a public servant, when we come in, regardless of how mundane you may think it is, it adds up to a bigger purpose. And I want to encourage every public servant, as we celebrate Public Service Week, to recognize how you are connected to the bigger purpose. The bigger purpose is to enhance prosperity for all in St. Vincent. And that is really a big mandate. And I think as public servants, we ought to be proud of what we do, where we serve, and approach our work on a daily basis with that mindset. I believe strongly and firmly that the public service, and I'll wind up here, is suffering serious marketing and branding issues. The perception of public servants themselves sometimes, and the general public is unwarranted. They are very hardworking and productive public servants who produce sometimes under trying circumstances. I do believe, yes, there's room for improvement. There always is room for improvement. But we must often recognize that without the service of the public sector, the things that we take for granted in the system, though they may not be perfect, would not be there for you to serve you and to meet your needs, especially during this period when we went through the COVID, we're still going through the COVID pandemic, and with the La Soufrière eruption, we were still able as public servants to keep the ship of state afloat, collect the revenue that needed to be collected, pay the bills that needed to be paid, and to ensure that we all got our monthly pay packet every single month. Now, that is not something to take for granted, and I believe that as we celebrate Public Service Week, we must pay some attention to that and recognize that we are workers of value. We must believe more in ourselves. We must understand our role in the scheme of things, and we must defend our brand by presenting ourselves as worthy public servants. And we must market ourselves by speaking positively about our profession.
All right, so that was Mr. Edmund Jackson, the Director General of Finance here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And again, our three panelists will be looking at, in a nutshell, the way forward, especially as we are trying to, I'll use the words of Mr. Jackson, stay afloat in these times when our economy and the livelihoods generally are hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, we're still seeking to recover from the eruption of the La Soufrière volcano. I'd like now to switch attention as we turn over now to Mr. Winston George, as he will give us now his presentation as the coordinator of the Caribbean Digital Platform. Mr. George.
Okay, just want to lead off from where Mr. Jackson left and probably shape my presentation in the form of, looking at development. And what is development? And in my mind, development is positive change. And it is not change only at the individual level, but it's change in the country context. So in terms of the current country context, we are a developing country. And probably our aim is to become what? A developed country. Now, how do we measure development? We heard about the amount of money spent every year and so on. Do we measure development by increased well-being, increased income, reduce vulnerability, improve food security, or more sustainable use of our natural resources? Or do we measure development in terms of the sustainable development goals, right? Now, the question is, how do we achieve these goals, bearing in mind that people and the public, they are at the center of the whole development process? And we ask ourselves, those items that I mentioned before in terms of measuring development, how do we achieve these outcomes, right? How do we achieve these outcomes? We must understand that we are in what you call a vulnerability context. What am I speaking about? From time to time, we experience shocks, we experience trends and seasonality and so on. So we have the COVID pandemic, we had the volcanic eruption, we have climate change, and probably at a community level or individual level, farmers, let's say the farmers, they experience larceny of their goods, right? Now, what I have observed, looking at development and how we respond as a public service, some of these things were sequential. So you had the financial meltdown probably in 2008, but from 2020, we have pandemic, and we had other health issues. We have a volcanic eruption at the same time. So from sequential to things happening simultaneously. And probably it has brought us to now think of worst case scenarios. 2021 parallels 1979. 1979 had all sorts of events. But as a public service, we now have to think worst case scenario. So in terms of responding to these things, we basically have to look at our structures and our processes in the public service as to how we respond and come up with different development strategies as we go forward. So we need to ask ourselves questions like, what are the structures that we have in place now to respond? Are they adequate? Are they effective? Do they require change? And the processes here speaks to the policies, the legal and regulatory framework, the culture that we have, and the institutions. And now, in terms of connecting my specific area to what I would have spoken about, we would have been able to respond very effectively in this multi-vulnerability context or scenario, because we have the benefit of ICTs. And basically what they do, they reduce space and time. And we could actually do more with less. And that is how we are pushing forward. I probably would want to stop here at this point in terms of my presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. George. They're speaking from his position as the coordinator of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project. And of course, as we go on, we probably delve a little bit more into how that can affect us on a daily basis, because I'm pretty sure that, you know, this is what a lot of the public servants, the viewers out there, and probably our audience are looking to see how, if we break things down practically to brass tacks, you know, how it affects us on a daily basis. Speaking of the way things affect us, we now hear from Dr. Joselle Miller, our resident psychologist, our panelist here this morning. And as Winston attests to the fact that we are experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic, we had dengue fever, we also had the volcanic eruption. All these things can take a toll on individuals and all of us collectively, mentally. So Dr. Miller can speak to that. So we now turn the attention now to Dr. Joselle Miller for her presentation.
Okay, the unanticipated shift to work from home during COVID-19, having to get used to the shift system of some days on, some days off, juggling children at home doing online school, has taken quite a toll on the employee's mental health. There are many who would say that I can't even find a breathing space in the comfort of my own home. It may be fair to say that COVID-19 situation has precipitated stresses in the professional life, personal finances, and family life of most of our employees. It is therefore imperative that we have this conversation that addresses the need to ensure that our employees' well-being, be it their physical, mental health, you know, is catered for, so that we can allow persons to feel some sense of happiness and job satisfaction. Work-life balance is an important aspect in maintaining the rhythm between personal life and professional life. Remote working or work from home has become part of our daily routine, which is now limited which is now not limited only to our office space, but even our families as well, because now your office is at your home. Due to the numerous Zoom meetings, and I must say I'm one person who has become zoomed out. I'm literally zoomed out, because you have Zoom meetings that you have to tap into at various times, even after the usual working hours, due to the participants in other regions and their time zones. Believing, therefore, that our human resource is our number one asset and priority, it is critical that we speak to their mental state and provide guidance and support to help manage their anxiety, maintain productivity, and overall functioning. I would like to stress some reminders. Number one, amidst the stressful constraints of this new normal, employees still need to prioritize their job. We have to address the right mindset, no matter what. As employees, we still need to put a very high importance on our job performance. I think now more than ever, we have to hold on to a high level of professionalism and swiftly do away with the old rhetoric that says that public servants don't get fired, which has for years fueled a sad misrepresentation that public servants don't work hard or take their role seriously, that there is a level of mediocrity that obtains in the way in which some jobs are performed. This change in operation has now opened our eyes to the reality of a fragile economy, which suggests that no position is safe and complacency cannot be accepted. So we strive to do better and be better and elevate our game in response to the new requirements. The last thing either of us would want to hear is that we have lost our job. So we have to maintain good work ethic, good stewardship and responsibility. And what does that mean? To whom much is given, much is going to be required. So as public servants, one of the questions we need to ask repeatedly and ask ourselves and be honest in the response, have I been doing my best? Number two, when we think of overlapping roles, and perhaps, you know, a lot of parents are feeling the pinch that, you know, not only have to deal with the fact that you have a lot of restrictions and requirements since COVID-19 in terms of your job, but for many parents, you have to juggle taking your child sometimes to the office. And we want to salute those offices and departments who would have been flexible enough to allow such. But then, it also adds to the stress of that parent not having the separation luxury for a few hours from their children. So you have to now get into work, you sign in, you have to set up your child to make sure that they are online and they're in the class. You have to make sure that they understand the instructions given and pray that the internet remains stable before you begin your workload. All at the same time having supervisors sometimes staring over your shoulder to make sure that you're doing work and you're not just simply parenting. The new normal in other countries have forced some companies and government ministries to think outside the box, allowing parents with the same age children to work together in caring for their educational needs. To maintain your sanity as an employee, it is imperative that you speak up about your limitations, acknowledge when you feel as if you're becoming overwhelmed to avoid shutting down. Number 3, we need to take care of ourselves. We hear the term over and over again, self-care. When you overlap work and life, you'll definitely need to take more care of your own health. We have to think of ourselves as parallel to that of a machine. If you want it to function well, you have to make sure that you do the update, that you have to make sure that you check in and see that everything is functional. Our physical well-being, we have to focus on what we eat, how we sleep, and even time for social engagement within the protocol guidelines for COVID-19. For persons who are unable to eat on time, you have to now make sure that you're making the right choices in terms of what you eat when you can eat. See if you can get at least minimum 7 hours of rest. Some persons, this is almost a fantasy that they can't even imagine anymore, because most times you close your eyes and the alarm goes off same time. Your mental well-being, keep your mind at ease and be watchful for signs of mental fatigue, distress, or breakdown. Practice having positive thoughts instead of entertaining negativity, and learn how to manage your stress levels. You can even consider breathing exercises, which will greatly improve your feelings and emotions. Your social well-being, you may be physically distancing yourself, or you should be physically distancing yourself, but that does not mean socially distancing. We have to still keep abreast with friends and family, and thank God for technology which allows for this. The last reminder I would want to give to create some balance in this new normal would be for us to make a critical decision about being bitter or being better. The negative effects of COVID-19 pandemic on mental health have attracted lots of interest, but little attention has focused on its positive effects and possible post-traumatic growth. The truth is, we all change as a result of bad experiences, but not all change has to be bad. Post-traumatic growth refers to the positive psychological changes that individuals experience through a struggle with traumatic events or situations. Persons can emerge from trauma or adversity having achieved positive personal growth. It is a comforting idea in the worst of times. We are now better poised to evaluate our growth in 5 areas: our appreciation of life, how we relate to others, our personal strength, recognizing new possibilities, and spiritual change. It would be unfortunate for us as a public service if we do not come out better and stronger after all the challenges we have experienced. But how can we reconcile all the bad with the good? How can we move forward mentally, emotionally, engage ourselves in a better outcome? I'd want to suggest that we must change our attitudes where necessary to foster not only individual growth, but overall as a public service. The overall image and perception of the public service has to change. It cannot be one that only speaks equality, equity, unity, fairness, collectivism, and inclusion on paper, but it must be demonstrated practically. Too much or too many unnecessary stresses are placed on employees that affect their productivity and sense of self-efficacy. It is important that we think of work-life balance, that as we think of work-life balance, we begin to let our employees know they are appreciated. Let respect be the mantra running through the service, where everyone's voice is worthy of being heard, where we work on building trust through open, honest communication, where we establish transparent frameworks and systems to guide the operation of work. We stress responsibility and accountability for all. We provide mentorship and not just managerial guidance, which is often misunderstood to be dictating orders, but rather we want to see leadership where persons are inspired to be better, when their work ethic shines through in an exemplary manner. Perhaps this is an area that we all may have to seek some level of forgiveness. But I think it is, definitely a change needed, where we have supervisors who expect that subordinates should show up on time and sign in by 8:15, and then the supervisor comes at 10. We have to ask the question of where is the leadership? The aim today is not just to create an understanding of how the mental and emotional functioning of an employee is affected by external variables like natural or man-made disasters, health crisis, home dynamics, but it is more so to show how the mental and emotional functioning of employees is affected by an environment that does not consider the integrity of humanity in the persons who serve each day at their best. Yes, we are resilient, I agree with that. But let us not bounce back into the operation that does not work, but let us aspire to create the necessary changes towards a stronger and more efficient public service. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Miller, and thank you, panelists, for those, quite informative presentations here this morning. Just to shift our attention a bit and put a little more focus on what's going to be happening for the rest of the week, or at least tomorrow, which is actually Public Service Day here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There's going to be a setup for a huge photo shoot that will be at, let me find it, will be at the car park of, okay, here it is, at the old Treasury, where Treasury used to be. All right, so there's going to be a photo wall set up, so we're encouraging departments and public servants to come out, have photos taken. Of course, Instagram is the thing of the day, more or less. So social media, another social media avenue. Tomorrow, that's happening tomorrow from 10 a.m. There will also be a lunch hour steel pan concert. So you can come on out and enjoy some nice steel pan music. There'll also be giveaways, tokens, packages, and that's all just tomorrow. There's also another big event that's happening on Friday, which we'll get into a little bit later on. All right. Once again, good morning to those of you who are viewing. If you're just viewing us on our social media platform, thank you so much for joining us. And we are going to get into a little bit later on a segment where you can post questions to either or all of our panelists here this morning, as well as our small in-house audience. Let me throw a question here, though, out, and this is just kind of where anybody can chip in where they feel like. But I want to direct it particularly to Mr. George, where you spoke of the drive of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, and of course, we are in a state where a lot of work, or most of the work that is being done, especially in the public service, had to be done from home at some point, which would have needed for internet access. And I'm pretty sure that even Dr. Miller alluded to it just now, the reliability of internet service. And I'm sure some of those who were hearing would have, the thought in the back of their minds with the internet we had it, right? What, if any, is an avenue for the project to ensure that internet service and internet service providers can give a reliable service, a service that is reliable enough for this to proceed?
It is well, the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project in the Vincentian context would basically rely on the telecom infrastructure. I probably want to address it from the point of view of probably regulatory as well as competition. So if we want to address it from the regulatory standpoint, we probably have to address the whole matter of consumer rights as it relates to the telecom services. So basically, what we have a duopoly. We have two major providers. Are they competing against each other? The government, in partnership with one of these providers, would have implemented the CASIP project, the National Broadband Project, which in itself, it was a public-private partnership, offers broadband services to the private sector as well. So competition should allow for prices to probably fall and services to be improved, while at the same time, we need to address the whole matter of consumer rights as it relates to telecom services. That is how I would look at that.
All right, Dan, thank you. All right. Edmund, I'd like to ask you this one. You made mention of, the things that excuse me, that are done, or basically what public servants do, is what keeps the quote unquote the proverbial ship afloat. In this time when we have seen a shift from the usual 8:15 to 4 or 4:30 in office for the departments that applies to folks working from home, right? Two things here. Where is it? Okay, here we go. How would that contribute now to, as you said, or would it contribute more? Would the digital work contribute more or less to the operation of the public service? And also, with the fact that I think right now most people know that one of the main major things that we are looking for, one of the major stumbling blocks probably to our continued development, is the fact that we have the COVID-19 pandemic going on. What, in your opinion, from the standpoint of Director General of Finance, what needs to happen, especially as it relates to the public service going forward, to keep the ship afloat?
Okay, it's a long question. But anyway, I just want to develop on something that Winston said in response to your question. The project, the Digital Transformation Project, as he indicated, is in all of the Windward Islands, the 4 Windward Islands. And there are national activities, but there are also regional aspects to the project. And one of the regional aspects to the project is that whole issue that you just raised, about the reliability and quality of internet. So ECTEL, which is the regional telecommunications regulatory body, and the local partner here is the NTRC, they are working on a whole new suite of legislation to strengthen the regulatory environment, and to be able to hold the hands of these telecoms to the fire, so to speak, in a more effective way than we currently are able to do. And the customer protection rights and conduct of business provisions will be contained in that legislation. So that is coming. And Winston is right. Market conditions are also critical. Maybe we need to see maybe another internet service provider coming into the market space. It's small, it's a fragmented sector, so who knows? To jump to your question, I think the public sector, the public service, the central government public service, was ill-prepared for remote working. We do not yet have the technological tools, properly deployed where they need to be deployed to allow persons to work effectively from home. A person, of course, could attend a meeting and so on and so forth. But, all our files are still paper files. So personally for me, there was no working from home. I went to work every single day, and I'm sure there are many other colleagues who would have done that. Because the thought of lugging home 10 files to put on my desk, no, a table at home, no, I wasn't doing that. So that's one issue. So one of the things that we need to do better, and we need to do, and probably speak about it when we're talking about what we consider to be the new public service, is to have those technologies deployed. We piloted a project, the Electronic Document Records Management Project, which we are currently reviewing, and it is something that we'll be reviewing under the project that Winston is coordinating. So I will tell you this, that during the period of time when we had the work from home, it was more shift. People were working on shift. There was less production. There was less productivity. It was necessary to keep us safe, to reduce the numbers in offices and the movement of persons on public transportation and the like, but it definitely had a dampening effect on the productivity of the system. Now, the public service is a huge entity, and in order for remote working technologies to work, every department needs to be on the same page. So a Ministry of Finance, for example, cannot say, oh, we're going to be introducing document management and so on, and then a ministry keeps sending us paper. So then we have to scan that and file that and so on. So there are a number of things that we need to do better as far as the technology goes. In government, one of the challenges we have, and Winston, who is more adept at this than me, will tell you that government-to-government interaction digitally is very fragmented. We do not communicate well with each other. Oftentimes, you will ask a colleague for an email address, and they'll give you @gmail.com when there is a @gov.vc. And the complaint is, oh, well, that service is never reliable, but I use it every day. So I'm making a plug for ITST and the email. They're doing some work on it right now because the server capacity is fast running out. But, of course, there's room for improvement. But use the service, and let's put pressure on them to improve it. So that's one of the things. So we have to communicate better internally. Our ability to access work from home, because we don't have digital files, is a major impediment. So the customs, I think, may be able to do that. I don't know if I think they scan their documents now, and they have the Asecuda World where you can log in from anywhere and perform services. Inland Revenue, not so sure, because the SICTAS program that they have, which is their e-tax program, is probably on its last legs, and they've been having some issues with the e-filing aspect of it, and they are working to build that. So I believe that we were ill-prepared for remote working. COVID brought that bare, but I think we need to learn the lessons from that and to begin to set about designing the architecture for a new public service.
All right, thank you. Dr. Miller, I want to ask you, if I know that when we think of the way that the Vincentian public or mindset, more or less, is, especially as it relates to things of a psychological nature, we probably either shun it or disregard it or tend to, I would say, well, what I want to ask is would you say that people underestimate the attention that is needed for mental health, especially as it relates now to the effect that the new norm can have on employees?
Most definitely. I think throughout the years we have seen some level of shifting in terms of person's mindset, but generally persons still think when you hear mental health, you start thinking right away mental illness, institutionalized. And we have to now change that conversation or that narrative for persons to understand that every single day, every interaction you have with someone has a psychological element, because we tend to transfer energies from one person to the next. So when you think about it, if you are in an environment that is deemed to be toxic, it is undoubtedly going to have an effect on you as an individual, your own psyche, your own mental processing. And then when you transfer that to your family, your children become affected. And they go to school and they transfer that same energy and that same mindset to other persons as well. So it is now for persons to understand that we have a responsibility. Every individual, you have a responsibility towards promoting mental wellness for yourself, meaning that you have to look inwardly and figure out what are those things, those triggers, those things that probably would not allow you to be at your very best, at your optimum. You have to now start thinking, what are those things I can do to make sure that my mental space is taken care of? Because there's a very thin line, and we tend to overlook that fact, that the mind is powerful, but it's also equally fragile.
All right, thank you. Again, we want to invite the folks who are viewing. We have our, question and answer segment that is fast approaching. If there's anything that you might have in mind that you may want to, find out more about, feel free to post your questions or even comments in the chat section of our live stream here this morning. I think this one might go, simultaneously to Edmund and Giselle, Dr. Miller. I happen to personally know of some instances where when employees, and we're talking, of course, public service, had to bring their children to the workplace to have to monitor them and to allow them to take part in their schooling. And they were told by some supervisors, right, that basically you shouldn't bring the child or children to the place of work. How can that affect, one from a mental standpoint, not only the child but also the employee, and also how would having the children being at the workplace affect the productivity of them being there?
Well, the thing is, I think when we started responding to COVID-19 and the challenges that came, that probably we did not have a lot of consensus across ministries. And I would say that, because when we think of education, having the children at home, and a lot of the parents looked forward to that opportunity where they can take their child to school and then they go to work. But now, if no one is home to supervise and to make sure that the child is sitting down and having, that class time, you have to take the child with you. There's an expectation that needed to change, and a conversation that should have been had with supervisors or across ministries to say, what can we do to create a space that is now going to foster that level of, care for the child, to make sure that they are not lagging behind. But at the same time, the question is asked, is that the responsibility of your supervisor or that ministry when, there are other family members that you probably can rely on? I've heard that. That's okay, it's not my responsibility to figure that out for you. You have to now tap into your other resources. But what if the parent does not have that resource? And there are a lot of parents who would say, I do not have somebody that I can turn to. Their productivity is going to be severely compromised, and then it is going to obviously, reflect badly on that individual as a worker. So in a lot of different components of that whole thing, persons feel like I'm not doing an adequate job as a parent. I feel like I'm not doing an adequate job as a worker. So all around, that person now is internalizing some level of self-defeat, and you're thinking that, okay, I am not cut out for this, which really and truly can then lend to even more heightened anxiety, depressive thoughts and symptoms and sadness and feelings like I want to give up.
All right, Edmund, any thoughts on it from the financial standpoint?
Well, I wouldn't be as dramatic as Dr. Miller there, but the issue you raise is a fundamental issue of trying to find balance and leadership in departments of government within a context of change and upheaval need to demonstrate, in my opinion, a bit more maturity as leaders to understand that in these circumstances, the ability of a worker to produce depends upon their psychosocial state. And in a situation where a parent would be anxious about the safety of their child, firstly, and secondly, the education of their child, to take a hard stance about, this child can't come to this office, is really an inappropriate stance. As leaders, our responsibility is not only to cater to the services we have to provide and the results that we have to deliver, but we also have to take care and look out for the interests of the persons who we are privileged and fortunate to lead. So I will make that standpoint. So it's a question of striking that balance. So because productivity can be hindered both ways. If there is an uncontrolled situation of kids at the office, and if there is a situation where there are no kids at the office, but at home somewhere by themselves, and you have an anxious parent. So I believe, as Dr. Miller said, it required some conversation within the department. And I believe that what we missed in all of this COVID response within the system was a general central guiding policy on a lot of these issues. Ministries and departments were somewhat left on their own to make determinations. And as you would expect, some leaders are more emotionally intelligent and aware and would make different decisions. Now, that is not to say a person is a bad leader or a good leader, but it just simply means that where they are in their leadership development, they may not have developed the type of skills and awarenesses that Dr. Miller would be citing. And so I believe that it's a balance that has to be struck. And if things are managed, if there are conversations, I believe we are creative and innovative enough to come up with ways for it to be done safely and without detriment to the productivity of the service.
All right, Dan, thank you very much. All right, at this juncture, we'll wrap up this little interactive portion of our presentation. We're getting ready now to jump into the question and answer segment. So for those of you who might have your questions, get ready. You can start posting them into the chat. For those of us inside who have questions that they might want to have addressed, we're getting ready to come to that, and we'll do that right after this. And welcome back to our panel discussion here this morning. Again, my name is Kyle Cato. I'm your host / moderator. Our panelists include Director General of Finance, Mr. Edmund Jackson, Dr. Giselle Miller, psychologist and CEO of the Vallejo Experience. And we also have Mr. Winston George, who is the coordinator of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, which is, as he said, has been implemented or will be implemented or in the process of being implemented in the four Windward Islands. The four Windward Islands. I was about to say four Windward Islands in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but the four Windward Islands. At this moment, we are going to open up our forum for any questions that we may have. Again, if you are viewing us live, you can post your questions in the comments section. I would direct the questions to, well, you could specify who you might want your question to be directed to, and I would direct that question your question to that person as well. Also, if there's anyone in our audience, we have our microphone set up there where you can post your questions as well. Let me kind of start one off and ask Edmund, and to probably answer this as best as you can. I know that at the end of the day, it doesn't fall directly on you, but since you're the person who has some insight into the finance of the country, we know that one of the main topics of discussion, especially recently, has to do with when we talk about the COVID-19 vaccine and the Prime Minister announcing that it could be possible. All right, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't want to quote him. Anybody say I say the PM say, right? But I'm just telling you from my understanding of it that it could be possible for employees to be sent home for not taking the vaccine. On a side note, for persons who, well, no, sorry, let me scratch that. The correct thing just popped into my mind. I was in a discussion on the weekend and we were talking about the economic implications. Right? Let's look at that way. The economic implications of persons not being vaccinated. Right? From the standpoint of Director of Finance, what do you think are some of those implications?
A very wise moderator. Um, yeah, you're growing in your skill sets. So I think that the public debate and the public policy discussions on the issue of vaccination is coming from the place where there are deep concerns for the long-term, the potential long-term economic effects if we fall behind in our vaccine rate. Personally, I've expressed this concern to my minister and the Prime Minister because the economy cannot sustain another year or two of contraction. And I'll say that again. The economy cannot sustain another year or two of contraction. So we contracted in 2020 as a consequence of COVID and the impact it had on commerce, travel, and the like. In 2021, we had projected to grow. Then, boom, literally, la souffre, and we are contracting further. Our worst case projections for contraction in GDP is up to 7.25%. That's significant in a real economic sense, in real goods and services. So it ranges between 4.5% to about 7%. In any event, that is significant, coming off of a contraction of about 3% in 2020. So if we were to take the 3% last year, the worst case this year, you're talking about an economy decreasing in size, potentially 10%. If we are to go forward in 2022 with a further contraction, this could spell disaster for each and every citizen in this country. It is absolutely important, regardless of what you believe about COVID and all of this, that we increase our vaccination rate. Around the region, the vaccine rates are improving. I looked at a blog just last night. The World Bank, an employee of the World Bank posted a blog where they were talking about how the economies of the world, in certain regions of the world, in 4 or 5 regions of the world, how they will fare in 2022 and the critical role that vaccination rates play. Now, what they're saying is that the world economy is going to bounce back well in 2022. The advanced economies of the world are going to lead that recovery. Both the United States and China are going to contribute at least 1/3, I believe, they said, of the growth that's going to be experienced in the world economy next year. Why? Because their vaccine rates are higher. The thing that they said, emerging economies, developing economies like ours, are lagging in vaccine rates, and our economies are projected to contract further rather than improve, rather than grow in 2022. That is troubling. That is troubling. For us here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have managed so far. But I don't want persons to celebrate that too much, because in our managing, we have increased our indebtedness. Our public debt has increased drastically between 2019 and 2020, now moving into 2021. Because, of course, we have to borrow more for reconstruction and rehabilitation to mitigate the impacts of la souffre. So when you hear public officials and political figures speak about vaccination, and sometimes maybe the messaging is mixed, sometimes it may be, I don't know, I don't want to characterize it a particular way, but it comes from a place where there is deep concern, some frustration with the uptake of vaccination. And it is absolutely important, I don't know which one the camera is looking at me so I can look at it, that we as a country increase our vaccine rate. I looked at the graphic that the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank posted recently on their website. And of all the member states in the currency union, St. Vincent and the Grenadines has the lowest vaccine rate in this region. You all will notice that if you look at television with a critical eye, all of the ads are pointing towards reopening of the economies. People are willing and eager to travel. However, I will tell you, we will be left behind in terms of tourism development, and I've spoken to the head of the tourism authority, and he is deeply concerned. if we do not get our numbers up, because persons will simply bypass us and head to another country in the region. And that is going to have deep, long-term economic scarring. And it simply means that our ability to recover is going to be more difficult. I want to make the message clear. I am not saying rush out there and take the vaccine if you don't, whatever. But it's a personal choice, but I encourage you, unless you have some medical reason, to look at it, think about it, and get vaccinated. I know I'm going to take some licks of this on social media because I know there are deep emotions about this on either side. But I've been vaccinated, my 2 shots, AstraZeneca. I'm still here, alive and kicking. But it is something that worries me. And from where I sit in the Ministry of Finance, I know what it is to keep the mill turning every month. I know how difficult it is to pay the salaries on a timely basis, to pay the public debt on a timely basis, because it is not a good thing to default, regardless of your economic circumstances, regardless of the shocks you're facing, because it leaves a level of uncertainty in the minds of creditors who lend you money, whether or not they should buy your paper on the market or not. So we have to make an effort to ensure that we maintain confidence in the credit markets. We have been doing reasonably well. The revenue has held, but it may not hold for much longer if we do not make sure that we are in a position to reopen and reopen strongly so that we can have more resilient and inclusive growth going forward. I'm sorry it took so long, but this is very, very important. And I appreciate having the platform, and I appreciate the question.
All right, thank you very much, Edmund. I think you have some fans in the audience here with that answer. All right. We had a question that was posted on the chat there. It kind of disappeared, but if I remember what it said, it was, how can we address a situation where a person who is responsible for making a particular decision is not at the office at the time, and there's a circumstance where the decision has to be made? I guess I can throw that to either Dr. Miller or yourself, Edmund. I know this is probably more of a personnel type of thing, but it could have implications, either one, on a financial level and also on a mental level for the persons who are employed at the particular place and need to find a way forward. So again, the question is asking, if a decision needs to be made on an issue and the person who's responsible for making that decision isn't there at the time, what could or probably should happen?
I'll pass it around, but I will say this quickly. I believe, it was Atticus Finch, To Kill a Mockingbird. Very simple philosophy. Put yourself in other people's shoes, walk around on it. So imagine you are the one seeking service, and you walk to an office. You might have done, the run around, and you are here at this point where you have you are waiting a decision. As far as you are concerned, you really do not care whether who is there to make the decision or not. You need your decision taken. And I believe as public servants, when we encounter these types of scenarios, everybody is accessible by cell phone, unless the person is hospitalized who has to make the decision. I believe that an effort should be made to reach that person and to get the guidance that needs to be done, received, so that the decision could be taken. Because I believe as a citizen seeking service, they want seamless interaction with the system. They don't want to hear that, Mr. Jackson is not in and Mr. Jackson has to make the decision. So I believe that is critical. Secondly, if Mr. Jackson is not accessible by phone, then someone who is sufficiently empowered should take the decision and inform Mr. Jackson immediately when he arrives. Now, and if there are any issues related to that decision, then it's Mr. Jackson's responsibility to clean that up. But I believe ultimately the public service, and this is the point I want to speak about when we're talking about the new public service, the public service needs to be a bit more service-driven and results-driven. Don't focus on you simply moving your piece of paper from your desk to your dip, but understand on that piece of paper you have some level of economic activity that you're affecting. And how quickly you do that and how smoothly you do that, it depends on how quickly maybe someone could be employed as a result of the movement of that paper. So I think we must always understand at the end of the day that we are there to serve. And that's why it's called a public service, all right? And if a citizen shows up for service, you do your best to provide the service. That's my philosophy anyway.
Okay, so one of the things that I would say that I've observed over the years, and I've been in the public service, I probably can't say that so that people will calculate my age, but it is upward of 15 years, bless the Lord. And one of the things that I think really needs to be addressed is an issue of micromanagement. That there are some places where persons are not empowered, and, you know, Edmund spoke quite nicely about empowerment, and somebody who is able to make a certain decision should go ahead and make it. But then we have persons who are being stifled for different reasons. And I think we have to get to the place as well where we really face some of the elephants in the room, that a lot of persons are being pressured into not really blossoming, and we have to now change the narrative and let it be understood that one person should not be the sole person responsible for a particular thing, because we have to start thinking of transferring information, and we have persons who shadow other persons, so that if, God forbid, one person falls down dead instantly, are we going to say that that department closes? The work continues. So somebody else has to be just as empowered to make certain decisions. I remember some years ago I went into a particular department, and I'm standing at a window waiting for to complete the task where I was there, and nothing was happening. There was somebody standing in front of me at an empty window, and I'm asking the question, what's the hold up? And they're saying, oh, well, you need to get it stamped there. And this is a window, and I'm telling you that's the window. The stamp is there. The person here did not reach over to take that stamp and stamp that paper, because that was not my role. And I cannot, do anybody's job. I'm sticking to my job. And when you listen to that story, right away, person started lashing out at that individual. But you don't know what goes on behind the scenes, because sometimes people come back and you feel so inspired and energized, and I want to be, able to do as many things as possible to keep the system rolling, but then you're being reprimanded. And all of this goes to the psyche of the individual. If constantly there isn't a sense of autonomy being suggested, then we're going to have persons developing that space of shame and doubt, becoming doubtful of themselves. I don't know if I can do it. I can. I think I can. But then I'm afraid of what will be the repercussions if I do, if my supervisor or the persons are saying otherwise. And these are the realities that we have to really be mindful of, that persons are affected for different reasons.
All right, thank you very much. And there's another comment here that speaks to basically that one person saying the worst thing is that when the person is on vacation, so you have to wait till they get back to have something sorted. I think I was told we have a few questions from in-house, so we'll take one of our questions right now.
Okay, good morning. My question is to, Mr. Jackson, and probably Mr. George can fill in also. Okay, so Mr. Jackson, he talked about the economy and all that. I wanted to find out what plans or policies do we have, or is there any being made in the event that, let's say, persons are still hesitant in taking the vaccine, right? We can't really force them. And I notice we are still, in a way, we are still operating like norm, even though things have changed. What technologically do we have, what plans are being made towards changing the way things are being done technologically? For instance, we still have to go to the income tax to pay our license. Standing up in the long lines. So that is one. And there are other things that we could consider, registry and all that. So over to you guys.
Well, well, your question is multifaceted. You started out the vaccine and vaccine hesitancy and so on. What I would say, though, if you were keenly listening, and I'll just touch on that, I believe the public policy response to vaccination and COVID management generally has been, as the circumstances permit or require, to change, ratchet up or down the control measures. And you'd have seen recently, because of the uptick in the positivity rate, that new public health guidelines have been gazetted that deals with a myriad of things and also accommodates some things. For example, COVID vaccine events and so on. You would have heard recently the Prime Minister speaking about programs to incentivize persons to vaccinate. And I suppose more details will come on that soon. So that is that. So there have been a variety of measures. The measures have been flexible and responsive to the circumstances in terms of the shape of the curve in relation to positivity rates and so on. In relation to the question you asked, the second part, this is something that Winston would have touched on. The digital transformation project is heavily focused on digitizing government services. And all of the services you mentioned, the customs, the income tax, the land registry, document management, and so on, so that you should be able to do all your stuff online with government. Now, we are way off from that, but that is the goal, so that at least we can perform services in a touchless environment, so to speak. But I don't want that to be a response to low vaccine rates, because we will probably have no income tax to submit, because there will be no business and no income to report income tax on if we do not get our vaccine rates up. Because the way the world is moving, you will need your vaccine to move around, and visitors will not come to St. Vincent, or very few would, if we do not get our herd immunity issues sorted out from our vaccine rates. But short answer, the digital transformation project is hopefully going to address these issues.
Okay, so again, in terms of the digital transformation project and the fact that we have information communication technologies, what we have now is that for services we have to walk to a particular government office. And if I may look at the vision of where we want to go, essentially you would want to sign on probably at home, 12 o'clock in the night. You probably be bringing in a vehicle at customs. And it requires interaction with several other government offices, probably public health, income tax, treasury, whatever. And that one-stop shop or trade would allow all the relevant documents for that vehicle to be placed in. And also you have the single sign-on, which would be done in terms of the registry. So that basically identifies you, and from there you could make your payment for whatever service and probably just go and pick up your vehicle. I guess the same thing would happen with, say, your driver's license. You do your inspection, the police send the relevant electronic document to income tax. And once that is signed off on, you make your payment online and you get your or inspection of your vehicle or whatever, that particular service that could be done quickly. Update your license, also update your vehicle license as well as your driver's license. So there are several services, and you could actually stop anywhere at any time and do that service. So that is the vision. Hopefully within the next year or two, we could get that done. So it's single sign-on, the relevant business process. So now the citizen would not have to walk from customs to income tax to do something before they could get the vehicle. They probably could stay at one place and do whatever they need to do and get that service done.
Okay, this is on. Good morning again. This question perhaps may be answered by Dr. Baylor or any other on the panel, but I have been in the public service for quite a substantial length of time and would have attended many of these panel discussions, different trainings and so on. Public servants come and public servants go. And in these discussions, basically you're getting the same message about the mindset of public servants and how do you change the mindset of public servants. Because we are understanding that in order for things to improve, in order for things to get better, public servants need to change their mindset. What incentive, what motivation, what is there to encourage public servants to change their mindsets? What is that? Because we would be hearing this discussion again, and the same thing would be coming out. Are we going to go around in a circle saying the same thing? What can be done to help public servants to change their mindsets?
Okay, so one of the things that I would say needs to happen out front would be for persons to have honest conversation about what obtains. And the thing is, there has to be some level of framework and systems in place that will guide accountability and responsible action, so that persons don't feel that, okay, this is something that I can easily get away with, or there is no level of accountability for lack of performance, that persons understand that it is an individual's responsibility, that even as you are employed, you have to be a good steward, and you have to now exemplify excellence in whatever you do. Now, in saying that, you also have to have the framework in place where persons appreciate the work done, where persons actually celebrate the efforts of their employees, because persons want to know that if I am putting in the extra effort and I'm doing the job, yes, I might be intrinsically motivated as an individual, but externally I also want to see that somebody's looking on and say, good job. That really goes a long way. There's a level of respect that also needs to be, throughout the public service, that persons understand that there is no big I and little you. That even though persons have a particular designation, it does not mean that we, replace humanity and that dignity and integrity of an individual. We replace it by now speaking to persons as if they do not matter. And one of the things that I'm very happy about that would be on stream very soon would be the Employees Assistance Program. And not to let a lot out of the bag, before it's time, but it is for us to get to a place now where we tell employees that you matter. We care about you and you matter. And we also want to highlight the things that needs to change, and we are adamant that we are not going to allow the same things from yesteryear that do not work to be transferred. So even when we think of persons coming into the public service, their orientation is critical. What are they going to be exposed to in the very start? Because sometimes persons come in with all the good intention, but the wrong apple can, or you interact with the wrong person or the wrong space, the wrong people, and everything changes. So it is going to be that everybody has to be of the same thought process that we want change. The fact is, some persons want change, some persons are very comfortable in what exists, and that in itself creates a conflict. But I'm pretty sure that Edmund has some incentives that he can speak about.
Thank you, Dr. Miller, but you're the behavioral scientist, so I'm an economist, social scientist. But anyway, it's an interesting question from the audience. I would say a couple of things. Firstly, I believe the environment within which we function as public servants need to change. I think Dr. Miller touched on it. She spoke about accountability framework. So I'll talk about performance management. It is critical because what you'll find, public servant A, who is a low-performing employee in the public service, leaves the public service environment and goes to commercial business house B, and they're an exemplary performer, or they migrate and they go to some other job overseas and they excel. What is different? It's the same individual. The environment within which they are functioning communicates to them that certain types of behaviors are accepted, certain types are not. That's the first thing. So performance orientation, we have to bring that back, for performance management. The second thing is we have to do better within the public service in preparing people for positions they are appointed to. I believe that most persons are academically trained, and I believe that is fantastic. You have a lot of persons undertaking degrees, but undertaking a degree in a particular area does not empower you or equip you to lead. Leadership is a skill, it's an ability that you have to develop, and persons ought to be given leadership training. So I'm taking a job here at Service Commission. I don't know if this is now the Public Service Ministry's role. In-service training is absolutely important. The public service workforce is the largest in the country. And if you were to look at the percentage of the amount of money spent proportionally to the amount spent on wages for in-service training, it's a paltry. So I believe we have to prepare people better because a person with the best intention, without the capacity, they are going to make a mess of it. So you can't give me a power saw to cut a tree down. I might end up cutting my foot off, right? So because I'm not trained to do it. So that's the second thing. And the third thing has to do with how we select people for leadership positions. I believe that there ought to be, no applaud, I believe that there ought to be a basic curriculum that a person must complete to emerge into leadership. So I believe it's a myriad of things. So the environment has to be one that is more rationalistic. That is to say, there's a performance system that tracks your performance and behavior. And the system of sanctioning has to be well-oiled. And public servants and supervisors must have the courage to call out deviant behavior, document it, and forward it to the requisite authorities. And now, the fact that you have leaders who are reluctant to do this tells you that they have not been prepared for leadership. We must also have leaders who are trained in having these difficult conversations with employees to call out poor behavior and low performance. It is not always easy in a small society to do this because, they said in the world we are all connected by 6 degrees of freedom. In St. Vincent, I think it's 0.5 because everybody is related to somebody and they know somebody, and we are socially, easygoing, and we are friends and we hang out on weekends. But you have to develop the skill set to be able to have those crucial conversations with an employee to call it out when it needs to be called out without being offensive, without rancor, without without a judgmental stance, but simply focusing on the behavior and not so much the individual. I'm beginning to sound like Dr. Miller here, but it is critical. And where I work within the Ministry of Finance, I try to do that. I recognize good performance, and I call out poor performance. I don't always get it right, but when I don't get it right, I'm man enough to go back and apologize. To say, well, I mishandled this, but this was my intent, and so on. So I think that is what we need to have. And we need to create a public service that is a learning environment. You're having a job, your learning does not stop there. Having a first degree, having a master's, it doesn't stop there. There are other professional developments, if you want to advance in the system, that you should have. Continuing professional development, leadership, project management, conflict management, blah, 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 all of those things. I believe we need to invest more in our people, and we can get more from our people if we do that. That's just my view. Winston, I don't know.
All right, we'll take one more from the audience, and then we'll go to our Facebook question.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Great panelists, and I'm glad for the opportunity to speak. I believe on behalf of a lot of public servants as well a while ago. And what I came here to see, it was touched on quite a bit. A while ago, there was an applaud, and it brought me back to the point, or to the thought I had, that sometimes there are public servants who probably have grievances, who have queries, and may be afraid to voice or raise them for reasons of feelings of being punished, or sabotaged, or something like that. I'm not saying that it's happening, but we need to find out from public servants, if there's any way that they feel disenfranchised. Public servants at the end of every year are evaluated. And I know there's a time for their employees for them and their supervisors or their bosses to rapport. But where does the employee who is really grieved say what is happening to them? And I believe an applaud is just an agreement, to say, I wanted to say that. I'm glad somebody has identified with the way I'm feeling, because there's no other way for me to put it out there. Now, I am happy that Dr. Miller is on a part of the panelists, and it shows that the public service has been thinking as well as our mental health. And what she said this morning really zeroed in on, is that sometimes we figure that mental health means that we have to be institutionalized. And I do believe that there are some public servants who, because of personal reasons, because of work environment reasons, because they feel, because I just thought about in-service training, but some people are trained and they figure that they are overlooked. I know about waiting and all of that, and people understand that they can wait, but sometimes they figure that they are overlooked because they thought they were part of succession planning, but when things happen, they were not the ones selected, maybe for reasons, right? But people are grieved for various reasons, and so we come together in workspaces and we cannot perform effectively because of what we have encountered emotionally and otherwise. And like in the schools for students, there are counselors who are placed all around. I know as public servants, if we want mental health help, then we probably will have to seek the doctors or pay for it. Is there any way, and I maybe even want to suggest it, that we can zero in a little more to encourage employees to seek counseling, to seek redress, to seek some sort of way of feeling belonging, right? And to understand that even if they seek guidance and counseling, it doesn't mean that their mental health, it doesn't mean that they have to be institutionalized, they are crazy, as we should put it, or so. But it is okay. It is okay for us to seek the right counseling, right? So Dr. Miller, if you could address that, please.
Yes, and definitely what you said is true. Hurt people hurt others. And we're at the stage now where we want persons to recognize that we care about your mental well-being and your emotional state. And this is where the Employees Assistance Program is going to be most critical and effective, because the Employees Assistance Program is going to offer that counseling for public servants, that you have a unit now that is set aside primarily to listen to you, and not just listen, but to try and provide adequate solutions that can help with your level of productivity. I know that a lot of the times persons hear counseling, and one of the major things people think about is confidentiality issues. And this is something that we have to work against and we have to work around. Understanding that confidentiality is not secrecy. When we think of confidentiality, we're thinking of privacy, that your information is going to be stored. But in some instances, there are certain things that will have to be addressed, which means there's a level of sharing that needs to take place with the authority given by the employee. So when it comes on stream and persons hear about the EAP, I want you to have an open mind to grasp that it is a move in the right direction, that we are saying pretty much to public servants that we have heard over the years. We have seen, we have observed, and now we are putting measures in place to say that this is going to be a turnaround, and the Employees Assistance Program is going to be geared towards training, as was pointed out, that is necessary, because persons need to be equipped and it has to be capacity building going forward, but it's also to take into consideration the allostatic, which is your everyday living. Every single thing that we encounter on a daily basis has an effect. I know most women might tap into that space where they want to talk a lot about certain things. Men tend to be a bit more intellectualized and want to, rationalize certain things, or they might, just simply brush it off. But we are all affected on a daily basis, and it is time now to tap into your mental well-being.
Yeah, thanks. I think the sister touched on something else also, a grievance mechanism. I don't think the public service has a clearly defined grievance mechanism. However, an aggrieved employee has the right to raise a grievance and communicate it to Service Commission. The issue, though, is that communication to Service Commission must flow through your head of department. And that in itself gives reason for pause, because an employee who is a subordinate may be hesitant to express a grievance if it concerns or touches on some issue concerning their superiors. So I believe we are currently looking at a new Public Service Act. I believe we are looking at that. I think it may well be useful to have within that mechanism, because most corporate entities have grievance channels, or I wouldn't call this a whistleblower, but they are whistleblower channels, but they're also grievance channels where a person can take their matters straight to their HR department. I think this is something that we probably need to take a look at to see how that is modeled in other public services around the region or in the world, and to see how that could be addressed, because I understand that particular situation. Because you don't want to dull the voice of an employee who may have an issue that they would like to have addressed. So that's just a thought for the Ministry of the Public Service. I must tell you that I was extremely pleased when the Ministry of the Public Service was created, because I recognize that it could bring value if it is well organized and focused in how it does its work, because the public service in itself is a huge workforce. And given the facts and figures I gave this morning, it is extremely important that this huge workforce is well trained, is organized well, provided with the tools to deliver the services that need to be delivered. And that can only be done within, in a cohesive sense, in my view, within a policy environment guided by a Ministry of the Public Service. So I really want to applaud the decision that was taken there, and I want to recommend that we maintain this ministry going forward as a standing ministry as part of the pillar of the public service into the future.
All right,
Good
thank you.
morning, everyone. Good morning to the panel. This question is for Mr. Jackson. The public health laws is a very powerful tool that can control and prevent the spread of infectious disease, for example, COVID-19. The threat of further contraction of the economy is real, but somehow there is a hesitancy of fully implementation of this law. Mr. Jackson, in order to prevent...
Sorry, I didn't hear the preambular.
Okay, I said the
parts.
public health laws, a very powerful tool in the prevention of spread of infectious disease, such as COVID-19. The threat of further contraction of our economy is real if we are to continue another year into this pandemic. What is the hesitancy of fully implementation of this law that can help us? Is there any consideration for it to be fully utilized?
Maybe you might need to elaborate for me when you say fully utilized, because as I am aware, the Public Health Act has been amended recently, and certain powers were introduced into the law to address the management of pandemics. And the CMO has been empowered by law to take certain actions, I guess under certain conditions. So I don't know when you say where there's hesitancy in fully implementing the law. I'm not, if you could be a bit more explicit
I don't
in
think
what
it's
you're
fully
asking.
implemented. We have, it gives control in terms of...
So, okay, let me help you out here. So, in your view, what aspects of the law are currently not being enforced?
We have a low uptake of vaccination. People are refusing.
Right. So
That
you're saying that the
The
law
public health laws can be utilized.
can make it mandatory?
Can be utilized to bring that under control. It gives...
No. You're not. You're saying it can be used to bring it under control.
Yes, it
which
can be utilized
So-
to bring that.
So you're saying
that
you're suggesting
aspect.
that the public health law should be used to make it mandatory.
Yes, we should.
Okay, but that's
need to
one
get
view.
to there.
That's one view. I believe you're finished. Sorry with the question.
Okay.
Right, that's one view, and I suppose that's a decision that could be taken, but I don't think that's a public policy stance of the government. I think from what I observed, the government recognizes that taking a vaccine is a personal choice. The government is doing its best efforts to provide information to the public so that they can be informed about making that choice. The government is making vaccines available, broadly available, without any exclusions of any demographic, except for those who are under 18. And the government is appealing to the good sense of Vincentians to respond positively to this. I believe that personally, and the behavioral scientist is here, persons will always resist that which they are forced to do. And I don't think that is really the right position to take. I believe, though, that we must do all in our power, use all the channels of communication, all the influencers we can find, all the methodologies and approaches that we can to get to people to come to this decision. I believe that a more grassroots approach to the information sharing and education needs to be adopted. I think we need to get down and dirty in the communities, sit with people, talk to people, to share that information. I believe that the social media channels are one thing, but there ought to be other channels and other approaches to tackling this message. The jingles on the radio, fine, but they cannot do the job by themselves. I've heard the Prime Minister put it this way, that he prefers to use the law, I'm referring to the Constitution, as a shield rather than a sword against the people. And I understand his position on that. And I believe that in attempting to to build that social cohesion within the community. We are appealing to that sense of Vincentianness, that persons would respond positively. And so the incentives ought to be in place, the sanctions ought to be in place, and the message continues, and the education should continue. So I don't think it would be while the law provides, that would be a useful policy tool at this point. That's just my own feeling, and I think this is what is captured by the policy stance of the government from my observation.
All right. We have one. We'll take one now from the Facebook post. This question says that this person would like to hear the panelists' view on the politicization of the public service. While it is not new, there is a view in sectors of our society that it has deteriorated and has contributed to the poor levels of service and a culture of anything goes. All right. So this gentleman is asking for a view on the politicization of the public service, as it might be perceived today.
Well, I don't know how to respond to that. I mean, he himself said it's not new, because the public service is the implementation arm of the executive, and the executive is people at the political level. The executive, the cabinet, sets policy. The bureaucracy, the public administration, implements that policy. And any government would want to ensure that, firstly, they put in place persons who are competent, because an effective public service means an effective policy implementation. They will want to make sure that they put persons in positions who are competent to implement and who are in sympathy with the policy positions that they present. That is the nature of government everywhere and anywhere. Even in the great United States, when a president comes in January, certain people move out in the public administration because there are certain political appointments, as you would anticipate. So I don't know in terms of the extent of politicization that is being referred to, but I am sure persons are looking at persons who are appointed at senior levels. I would say it is normal. If we are saying that it drills down deeper into the system, then there may be issues. But if you notice my response, it is in the policymakers' interest to appoint competent people firstly, because you want your policies to be implemented. And the Prime Minister always says it nicely. Good politics is good policy, and good policy is good politics, right? So that is key. I am sure that there are persons who will have grievances, who will think that, hey, and this happens in any dispensation. And I understand that and appreciate that. So I'm not putting my head in the sand. But that'll be my response. I don't know, anybody else?
So I appreciate Edmund's response, and I have some level of agreement there. The thing is, though, that I believe with transparent frameworks and certain mechanisms in place to hold persons accountable, then we may have a better ability to get past some of the perceived politics that exist. And it is very important that we understand as well that, politics is embedded within each and every one of us. We all have our own ideas and values, ideologies, and all of these things that sometimes speaks to our own decision-making process and how we go about doing certain things on a daily basis. What we have to start now is promoting more integrity, fairness, equality, and actually putting these things in place, measures in place to, safeguard against any level of victimization or discrimination or whatever else that may obtain or exist, and allow persons to feel that they are coming in on an equal footing. I think that is one of the biggest challenge. Some public servants may feel that we are not all equal, and that is a conversation that we probably need to start having to start making certain changes in that regard.
I want to probably address it more from the perspective of the public servant or the individual. And I guess Sir Jackson mentioned some things. First of all, you are obligated to be a professional. You must be a professional. So you have a task, you have a role, you do it diligently, right? And one of the things in my 33 years in the public service I would have learned is to be patient too. You know, you also have to be patient, and we have to look at self-motivation too. So apart from if you felt, okay, you were victimized or you did not get a particular promotion, you continue to ask yourself the question, where I came from, what am I doing here, where am I going? Fundamental questions you ask yourself. So even until I did not get a particular promotion, and it was probably tied to politics, how do I respond? There may be several ways of responding, right? But I want to point to your whole professionalism, your whole self-motivation to respond to issues of politics. And as Dr. Miller said, everywhere there's politics. So there's organizational politics, and there's also the, party politics and all these sort of things. So sometimes persons favor you for one reason or the other, but I tend to believe in a higher being who will favor you at the right time.
All right, thank you very much. At this point, we are getting ready to wrap up our panel discussion here. I just want to take this time out to remind folks of what else is on tap for Public Service Week of activities. Tomorrow, which is actually Public Service Day. We'll have the minister's speech as well as the VC3 Roundtable program where public service will be the talking point. Also tomorrow, there will be, the photo session. So at the old Treasury location in that car park area, it's going to be set up where public servants and different people from different departments, and also, folks who are not necessarily in the public service can come and have photos taken. And we'll take the public service celebration to the world of social media as well through Instagram. Thursday will be the day when the different departments and ministries are going to be celebrating and probably rewarding in some manner public servants for their years of years of service, not years of activity. So persons who will be recognized for their years of service in the public service in their various ministries and departments. So for those who would have been in the service for quite some time, I want to at least take my time out to personally congratulate you and thank you for the service that you would have given St. Vincent and the Grenadines over the time. And then on Friday, there will be a special recognition ceremony. Again, that will be live on social media, on all social media outlets. So you can catch that. And I've been made aware, that the different departments are planning, special presentations. That is something that I particularly am looking forward to. So we're going to be seeing that on the live feed, on the live watch party. That is on Friday. I think that gets started from about 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. All right. So you can look out for that there. At this time, we'd like to invite the Deputy Director of the Public Sector Reform Unit to deliver the vote of thanks, Mr. Elvis Charles.
Thank you. It is indeed an honor to be given the privilege to say thank you to all who are here today. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Edmund Jackson for giving us an education into the whole process of budgeting, helping us to appreciate the budgetary process of government, how the public's money is being spent. Thank you. I'd also like to thank Mr. Winston George for giving us that education as to how a digitalized system, a digitalized government, can really help us to, in a country's development, and help all public servants to conduct their business easier than normal. Dr. Miller, we realize that you have a wealth of information as to how public servants are to go about their daily duties. We know that a happy, mentally fit public service is equal to production. And we thank you for sharing all that wealth of information with us. And this would no doubt help our public servants to be happier, more productive, and we are going to enjoy our work life. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Khalil Kato, for accepting the task of moderating this morning's program without fuss. Thank you for the wonderful job that you have done. We'd like to thank the media, VC3 in particular. Thank you for carrying this information live to persons in their homes. And the radio stations that were involved, thank you very much. We'd like to thank Pablo, the technician, also API for doing a magnificent job as usual in helping to spread the government's message throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the diaspora. We'd like to thank Mr. Ricky Adams, Jomo Francis, Ezzy Roberts from CDC. We'd like to thank the staff of the Peace Memorial Hall, the committee members for putting all this activity together, and we'd like to thank the public servants who came out this morning to really making today's activity a success. I really thank you all, and I hope that we would all benefit from this wonderful activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elvis. And that wraps up our panel discussion here this morning. Thank you again for viewing, and continue to be a part of Public Service Week here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.